Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 20 of Chess Basics, Things Every Chess Player Ought to Know. So today we're going to finish off our coverage of the Ruy Lopez opening by looking at the famous Marshall Gambit. And this is the game that where the Gambit originated. It was played between Capablanca and Marshall in 1918 in the Manhattan Chess Club. And the story goes that Frank had discovered this gambit a few years earlier and had been saving it to spring it on Capablanca at an opportune moment. And this was his chance. So Ruy Lopez, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and a6, the Morphy defense, and also the main line. Bishop a4, knight f6, and it continues in the main line with bishop e7, rook e1, now defending the pawn. And after this pawn is defended, there's a real threat of bishop takes knight and then knight takes pawn here. So you have to kick the bishop back or defend your pawn. And the bishop goes to b3, and then black castles here. So this is the first move that's not the main line. This is the castling at this point is an indication that black wants to play the Marshall Gambit, possibly. So the normal move, the main line is d6. And white would continue with c3 and d5. Okay, but black castles here. And if white continues with c3, as was played in the game, then you're in for the Marshall Gambit, potentially. To avoid the Marshall, the most common moves are h3 or d3. But white played c3 here, and black played d5. And this is a gambit now. White can take this pawn, and when black takes back, the rook and the knight are coordinating in their attack on the e-pawn, and it's only got one defender. So the way it goes, take the d-pawn, the knight takes, and then you can just grab the c-pawn because it's defended by the rook. Now there's an exchange of pieces there on the e5 square, and then Frank here played knight to f6. The modern way of playing the Marshall Gambit is to play the move c6. But we're going to take a look first at how Marshall played it, and then we'll show a modern game. And by the way, I will put links to both of these games in the description of the video, so you can check those out for yourself. Take a look at them with your own computer engines, because you can look at them for a while and discover new things all the time. So knight f6 was played, and the rook just went back. It's really not doing much good out here, and it's going to get kicked around by the next move anyway. Bishop d6 would have kicked that rook, so it's just getting out ahead of that. And then white plays h3, trying to keep pieces out of this g4 square. And the first really interesting move after that pawn sack is this move knight g4. So is he sacrificing a knight? Well, it turns out it's just not good to take that knight. So if pawn takes, let's back up. He played queen f3, which actually is one of the computer recommendations here. But if you take the knight, and if you give the computer a chance to chew on this, first of all, black is coming out with queen h8, threatening mayhem on h2 here. Queen f3 does not work out, actually. So let's give the computer time to realize this. Let's see. Well, let's play it. I'll show you. Queen f3. Now he's thinking. Bishop h2 check. King runs to f1. And now bishop takes g4. Okay, so this is a drawish kind of line. Oh, no, there it is. Yeah, I thought it was not a good line. Okay. Queen going to e4, bishop f4. So this is a bad line for white. If he wants to hold this position, he's got to play something other than queen f3. And if we go back now, computer's given up on that queen f3, and it's trying another idea, rook e4. But if you follow down any of these lines, turns out that black gets some kind of advantage. So the idea of taking that knight is just not good. And very hard to see this kind of stuff over the board. This is one of the reasons why opening theory is important if you're going to play some of these sharp lines. Because to figure something out like that in the time allotted, it would be pretty difficult. But Capablanca apparently managed to find this move on his own, queen f3. Or maybe just instinctively knew that there must be a kicker with that move. It looks bad. It looks bad to open up your h-file and allow the queen and the bishop in there. So visually it's not very appealing. He plays queen f3, and Capablanca follows up with queen h4. Still not a good idea to take the knight. Capablanca plays d4, getting the bishop into the game. And now Marshall plays knight takes f2. And instead of taking the knight may be possible here, but rook e2 is probably a better way to round up the knight. He wants to take that, but there is the bishop coming to g3. So if he takes with the queen, there's at least a skewer between the queen and the rook there. So if he can take with the rook, maybe it's better. So rook e2 is played, and now bishop g4, skewering the queen and the rook this way. And now it is okay to take, finally. So he grabs that bishop. But it is funny that two pieces were placed on the g4 square. You couldn't take the first one, but the second time you can take it. Now bishop h2 is played with check. King runs to f1 and bishop g3. So the bishop e is sort of protecting the knight. So after rook takes there, he could win the exchange back. But that would not be particularly good. The problem is that white's already in black. Black has already given up too much material. If he were to trade out here, say rook takes, bishop takes rook, queen takes bishop, queen takes queen, king takes queen, we'd be left with 2 rooks for black and 1 rook and 3 pieces for white. And 3 pieces are just much stronger than a single rook. So this would be winning for white if he were to just try and win the exchange. He has to try and get something more. But he has a trick up his sleeve here still, which is queen h1 check. And after the king moves, the queen is hitting the bishop here. The bishop is hanging. So let's see, what else could happen here? Bishop takes f2 was played. Yeah, that's right. It's black's move. Sorry, I was getting confused. I was thinking what white can do here. But so the queen chases the king away with check, and then the bishop grabs the exchange. And now if the queen takes the bishop, then black's queen can take this bishop, and it's just 2 pieces for a rook, which is the situation we get into. Capablanca decides to keep more material on the board by playing bishop d2, and bishop h4 is played, retreating this bishop out of take. And so we can pause and consider the situation here. We have 2 rooks and a bishop for black versus a rook and 3 pieces for white. So white has basically 2 pieces for a rook, which is a slight advantage for white, but on the downside his king is kind of exposed. So the computer thinks white is better, and first of all, white's going to try and simplify as much as possible. But black is not going to want to trade the queen, so he throws in a check first with his rook, and then he gets his queen to f1 with check. King goes to c2, and now the bishop can go to f2. So black was able to get his pieces out away from the threat of being exchanged, and white's king, however, is no longer so exposed. He's managed to get to a somewhat comfortable square. And anyway, the game goes on. I don't think I'm going to go through the rest of the game. Capablanca manages to win this, and if you see the computer assessment, it thinks that white is doing fine here. It's just a little bit tricky for an average person to play. White still has a problem of developing his pieces. The knight can't move for the moment because the rook behind it is trapped. So, I'm not sure which side I would actually prefer here. But anyway, Capablanca did go on to win. I guess this move, queen f3, is pretty good. It stops some of these ideas of, I would want to play rook e7 here. But yeah, I guess that's not the best move. It likes queen g1, which was Marshall's choice. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to show you from this game. You can take a look at the game and see how the rest of it goes. I wanted to stop the engine here and take one more look at how this is played in a modern game. So this game was played in 2012 between Sergei Karyakin and Levon Aronian. Levon Aronian is one of the top 3 players in the world, and Sergei Karyakin is in the top 10. It's played in August of last year, so a recent game. And you see the opening moves are all the same up to this point where, okay, so the gambit is played, takes there, he takes the pawn, and instead of moving the knight here, black in the modern way of playing it keeps the knight on this square. It can possibly jump into the game, through other routes, and just supports the knight. And white plays d4, supporting the rook. Bishop goes to d6, just as in the other game. You want to get your attack going, and the rook goes back to e1. The queen comes out to h4, and now one of the few moves that defends here, maybe the only move, is g3, because there's this threat of the bishop and the queen on this h2 square, and you need to block that. But then the queen gets into h3, and there are these weaknesses. And so in this modern line, it's generally considered even, and black is playing this for a draw a lot of times. So he's given up a pawn, but he has enough of an attack to merit at least a draw. So one of the problems is you would like to develop this knight, but the knight blocks the bishop. And if you develop the bishop here, it can get exchanged off. And it's also a little bit too slow, because this bishop here can come to the square g4. I mean, this is black's idea. Bishop to g4 and then to f3 and then checkmate on g2. So pretty simple plan, and you've got to do something about it. So this maneuver played by white is queen e2, bishop g4, and queen f1, guarding the square this way. So if the bishop f3 is played, then the queens can be traded. So actually, I would just lose the queen. So the queen has to retreat to h5. Then the knight comes to d2, covering this f3 square. Rook a to e8, f3. So trying to chase away some of the pieces. Bishop h3, and exchange of rooks. And now this funny move, bishop to f4. Let's see, he doesn't take that bishop, so I suppose there's something wrong with taking. Can I figure this out? Yeah, there's a problem if he takes. And queen here, check. And then the queen is coming into the square g2, which is pretty deadly. The knight is covering this square here. So whichever way the king runs here, that's an immediate checkmate. And if he runs to this square, queen comes in with check, and that's also a checkmate because the knight is guarding that square. So, and there's no way to block the check. So it's not good to take the bishop. So this continues the theme we saw in the last game, where you could place your pieces on squares that are guarded by pawns and get away with it because of the tactics. So bishop takes d5 was played. That eliminates this checkmating threat here with the knight covering that square. So bishop takes d2. You can't leave the bishop there hanging. Bishop takes d2, pawn takes, or queen takes bishop on d5. And so we get to a simplified game here. And after a little bit, the queens and the rooks come off. And the problem we have is that the remaining bishops, after all the heavy pieces are traded, are of opposite colors. So if white wants to continue playing for a win, he's got to keep all the heavy pieces on. But black, in this game, manages to force some exchanges. And in this position, here they agreed to a draw. And it's basically neither side can make progress. And in games with the opposite-colored bishops are drawish in general, and no side has enough of an advantage to press for a win. So they agreed to a draw here, and that's what happens a lot in master games lately. So you see a lot of lines being played like d3 and h3 that avoid the Marshall Gambit altogether. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little overview of the Marshall and the Ruy Lopez in general. That finishes this sequence of videos on the openings. And in the next set of videos, I'm going to return to the endgame and take a look at some simple rook and pawn endgames. So stay tuned for that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.